Would you like to know what equipment is the right equipment for your dog when you're out in public or taking your dog for a walk, or maybe you're going to an obedience class and you need to be able to manage your dog? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I know it's confusing. I mean, look at the wide variety of options that you have in training equipment. How would you know what's the right thing to pick? Well, I'm going to try to help you sort through that today. Now, to start with, I've always liked this example. If you and I sat down to dinner together, we'd probably both have a knife and a fork and a spoon. 3 different utensils to use while we eat our meal, but they were all designed for a different purpose. If I try to eat my soup with a knife, it's not going to work. And it's similar in dog training equipment. Really, all of it is designed with a different purpose and a different dog in mind. We're going to start from the beginning with this piece of equipment, which I would refer to as an identification collar, or just a flat collar, right? You've seen this. Your dog is probably wearing one right now. And that's really its purpose in life, is to have the dog's tags on it for identification purposes, but it's not a training collar. The exception to the rule is if you have a very senior dog, then this collar may be sufficient for a senior dog. And when you think about it, do you ever see old dogs pulling people around? No, it's the young ones. But anyways, a flat collar is an identification collar, and that's what it was designed for. But if your dog is elderly, it may be sufficient for taking your dog for a walk. Now, what is the difference between a flat collar and all the training collars that we're going to be looking at today? I'll show you what the difference is. I'm going to come on down here to what we would call a Martingale training collar. And it's kind of interesting. A lot of dog training equipment was actually named after horse training equipment. That's where the word Martingale came from. But what you can see with this collar, what's completely different about it is it has this little chain which gives the handler the ability to give the dog a correction if they started to strain. Now, you learned in school, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So if a dog starts to pull and all I do is hold on or pull back, well, they're going to pull all the more. For every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. If I want to teach my dog to walk on a loose leash, I am always keeping the leash loose. And if the dog would start to strain, I can communicate, nope, that's not okay. Do not strain on the collar. And for a lot of dogs, this would be a very mild, tender way to get their attention. And for a lot of dogs, that may be sufficient. And there would be other dogs where they wouldn't notice that. You know, and as far as a dog's attention-getting ability, I've always liked the example. I'll say, if you and I were together and we're just standing here and I take a little straight pin and I poked you with a straight pin, you'd probably say, ow! But that would hurt. But if we had a shooter in the building, you wouldn't have felt that, right? So what does it take to get your dog's attention? What if your dog's walking and it sees another dog, or it sees a rabbit or a cat and it has a high prey drive? What will it take to get its attention then? That's the distinction. That's why all of the different types of training collars, because they all have different levels of attention-getting ability. The way I have it set up on this wall is that we're going to go from very mild levels of attention-getting ability to collars that are more capable of getting your dog's attention. You know, and showing you, we'll go down here, I'll start here. This is another style of Martingale, and what's different with it versus the other one I just showed you is that there's no chain. It's completely cloth. And funny, in today's world, there have been service dog organizations, therapy dog organizations, where they want the dog. The Martingale is one of the pieces of equipment they'll allow, but they don't want it to have any kind of chain in it. So this could be great for therapy dog work. It just all depends on who you're working with. And then you've got this little Martingale I showed you. Now we're going to work our way up the wall. Here we have nylon chokers. And so it's just made of nylon. You know, and while we're talking about it, that word choke. A lot of times in today's world, people think, well, a choker, I've heard that you shouldn't use those. And really, if you looked up the word choke in the dictionary, you know what it means? It means to stop. In the era that, for example, the choke chain got that name, engines didn't even have keys. They had chokes, right? If you mowed the lawn, you had to turn the mower off. You turned off it with a choke. So all the word choke means is to stop. So that's where that came from. But so here was a nylon choker, and they're very mild, actually. And a step up from the nylon choker would be the chain choker. And probably the chain choker has a little more bite to it, and it also has a little more noise. And I think the noise helps get a dog's attention, right? So there's probably no piece of equipment on the planet that has trained more dogs than the chain choker. This is interesting. Even in today's world, do you know that if you went to an American Kennel Club obedience trial, the only two pieces of equipment that they'll allow you to use in the obedience training ring is either the good old-fashioned chain choker or a flat collar, like the collar we started out talking about, the identification collar. So again, we've got martingales, we've got the nylon chokers, we step it up a little bit with the chain chokers. Another step up in attention-getting ability is the prong collars. Now here's the plastic prong collar. And again, it has this quick release mechanism. So when I pull on it, right, it would actually have a little pinch action. Now, some people look at that and they say, oh, that looks cruel to me. But I have never had anybody come in and say, I hate my dog, and they use that collar. No, the only reason you would use a collar like this is you get results quickly. You know, when you're training a dog, if you've got the right collar, you should be able to give them a correction just once or twice, and the dog's like, oh, I understand. You got my attention. That makes perfect sense. If I strain on the collar, that's what I feel. When the leash is perfectly loose, we're both happy. So the pinch collar has more attention-getting ability, and there are a lot of trainers that'll say this is actually, and veterinarians, where this is actually more humane in the sense that all of your pressure points are equally distributed around the dog's neck. So we have the plastic prong collar, we have chain prong collars, and they come in different sizes, mini for little tiny dogs to small. Same thing, there's also a lot of people favor the cloth covered prong collar, possibly more politically correct when you're out in public, but again it has the prongs, and you have the ability to decide how many prongs do you want for your dog, right? So this collar right now, it only has like 3 in it. You could start with 1 on each side, or 2 on each side, or 3. You get to select and figure out what collar works best for your dog. We wouldn't have so many different styles of collars if all dogs were the same. But they're uniquely different, right? Regardless of breed. Regardless of breed. You could have one little Jack Russell Terrier that does wonderful in a Martingale. And you could have another little Jack Russell Terrier that may need a prong collar. So it's not by breed. It's not by size. It's by that individual dog. And what does it take to get their attention? Okay, so we've gone through most of the options that you would have available to you for collars that go around a dog's neck. We have two other options though. The next one we're going to talk about is what's called the head halter. And I have two different styles of those here. Probably my favorite is the halty. And again, you'll see head collar. This marketing, advertising, it says head halter. But when you look at that packaging, what does that remind you of? Of course, a halter around a horse's nose. And once again, that's where a lot of these ideas came from. Helping you understand how that works. You know, if I had to walk a horse, there isn't a collar on this wall that would have enough attention-getting ability for a horse, right? So once again, we're back to physics. And with a horse, the reason a halter works is even if that enormous animal tries to throw its weight forward, all it does for the human being is they turn their head. The horse can't get all of its shoulder and body weight into a halter, right? So physics-wise, it gives the human being the advantage. Now, with head halters, it's just crazy. It never fails to amaze me. There are dogs where it's just like the perfect match. I've had enormous Labradors in here where they used to pull the owner and we put a head halter on the dog, and it's just crazy. I mean, it's crazy. That same dog, when they hit the end of the leash, it's like you have a feather on the end of the leash as opposed to what it used to feel like, you know, to the person's shoulders, taking the brunt force of another type of collar. But what I'm saying here is it's really, this is just something you learn by trying. I'm giving you a basis for how to choose and how to select and what the difference is. But you're not going to know for sure until you try these things with your own dog. And you know, I've often told people that the word obedience, do you know where that word comes from? The word obedience means to listen. And if we want to be obedient to God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, you have to listen to your heart, right? Your heart knows things that I would never know. And oftentimes when I'm here with people, I say, okay, now I've showed you everything. What do you think? What would be a right starting place? And it just never fails to amaze me. They'll step back and they'll look and they'll say, I think, you know, and they'll pick a particular collar. And more often than not, they're right. So you have to step back and inhale all of that and what feels right to you. Because if it didn't work, okay, you can always step up. But that's the rule of training. You know, you start with a mild piece of equipment, you never use any more force than necessary. And at the same time, it's almost cruel, in my belief system, it's cruel to not use the force that is necessary, because then you just torture yourself and your dog. If you're not happy, your dog's not going to be happy. The last thing I can think about the head halter is, you know, with a lot of dogs, there is an adjustment period. But there are dogs that, in my opinion, will never adjust to those. So, again, it's trial and error. 3 types of equipment. There are collars that go around a dog's neck. There's the head halter. And the third option for dogs that, you know, there could be several different reasons why you would choose it, but there's always the electronic collar. And that would certainly require more training on your part, showing you how to use the right technique. But it can certainly have more attention-getting ability than all the rest. When everything else fails, it's going to do the job for you. I hope all of that information will help you make the right choice for your dog. Thanks.